Baruchim Abbaim, and welcome to Torah Talks, Chazaq's Tuesday night program with special guests. Tonight we have with us a very special guest, Rabbi Mordechai Ginsparg. Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi. How you doing?
Pleasure.
Welcome. How's everything?
Baruch Hashem, and very happy to be here.
Okay, pleasure all of ours. And Rabbi Ginsparg is the Menala of Beis Yaakov of Queens, which we'll hear momentarily about, where my wife went and my children, Baruch Hashem, my daughters go. Hashem. And our minute, our custom is a little bit of a bio, a little background of the great work the Rabbi is involved with.
Thank you. Okay, so Baruch Hashem, I've just finished my first year at Beis Yaakov of Queens. I moved from Chicago, where I lived my entire life, other than when I learned in Eretz Yisrael. But I was there for my entire life till I moved to Woodmere, where I'm living and working, of course, at Beis Yaakov of Queens. And Baruch Hashem had a fabulous first year in the wonderful, wonderful school. In Chicago, I've been involved in chinuch for more than 30 years. As working as a Sgan Menal in yeshiva, boys yeshiva, also teaching in Beis Yaakov, also worked in elementary school, also co-ed. So I was involved with high school boys, high school girls, elementary boys and girls, both in yeshivish, Beis Yaakov, and in modern Orthodox co-ed schools.
Wow, unbelievable. The whole gamut, everything,
yeah,
a little bit of everything.
Absolutely.
The Rabbi has a lot of experience, and that's why Baruch Hashem, the Queens community is very, very lucky to have the Rabbi as the Menal of Beis Yaakov in Queens. And Baruch Hashem, the first year was amazing, and from strength to strength,
Amen.
Much continued Hatzlacha. Okay, great, Rabbi. So the topic for tonight, Rabbi, is critical connections. And we just heard about the vast experience that the Rabbi has had in the area of chinuch of education. If you would say one aspect in the chinuch and educational Jewish world that needs some chizuk, some strengthening, what would you say that would be?
Yeah, I would say I'm very passionate about the idea of building the connection with a Rav, and specifically I'm referring to from the student's vantage point. Let me explain.
Sure.
Certainly this is true for boys, but it's more natural in a yeshiva setting that boys will connect with their rabbeim, and that continues through Beis Medrash, etc.
Right.
What I really noticed, though, is with the girls, both in high school and in elementary school, in Beis Yaakov, the girls, they aren't always with the mindset of talking to a Rav and asking a shaila to a Rav.
Ask a question. They don't feel comfortable.
Ask a question to a Rav. And when for example, when I would ask the girls in Beis Yaakov in high school in Chicago, what's your connection with a Rav? They'd say, well, I don't need to ask the question. Right now my father asks, or one day, Mir Hashem, my husband will ask.
Right.
And I tried to explain to them that, first of all, there could be a situation where they're not around, they're not available, and you're going to need to make that phone call. Other times it could also be a personal question that you need to ask. You have to gain a level of comfort calling Rabbeim and Rabbanim. And this was true also in elementary school, because obviously if we can build that in elementary school, by the time they get to high school, it's already even more of a connection.
Right.
So I started a long time ago. I did this with boys also, but certainly with girls. Something called Ask the Rebbe, Ask the Rabbi, Ask the Rav, where I would, for example, put on the blackboard a number of nice questions. I wanted to make sure the girls were comfortable that it was a good question, so I came up with the questions. They could be about halacha, hilchos Shabbos, about whatever the different topics were. And I told each girl they have to pick a question and go to their shul rabbi, ask the question, get the answer, and then we're going to discuss it in class. And they had to do this. And
it'll break the ice.
Break the ice. And there was no
Amazing.
Emailing. No, you had to either go in person or make a phone call. Because that's the natural way. People normally, you see the Rav in shul or you make a phone call. No hiding behind technology or anything. Go do that. And the girls did it. And there were so many amazing lessons they got out of it. First of all, almost everyone told me it was much easier than they expected. The only time it was difficult was sometimes the Rav might be difficult to track down. Maybe he was out of town. But in terms of the friendliness of the rabbi, the comfort level, oh, this was so much easier. It was. I even received letters later from girls in seminary or after they got married telling me that because of this assignment, they have no problem calling their Rav now.
And they stay connected with him over the
Stay
years.
Well, it could be also they might
Amazing.
move to a different location, but irrelevant. The point is they now realize that it's not scary or intimidating to get on the phone and call a Rav. And this wasn't only for halacha purposes, for Jewish law. It was also for getting advice, for guidance. So I wanted to make sure that even at a young age, certainly at elementary and into high school, that ice was broken and they saw how wonderful it is to call a Rav. And Rabbi Meir, I'll tell you another interesting thing was that sometimes if a couple of girls had the same question, so the Rabbeim might give slightly different answers, which I tried to explain to them is fine. We have machlokes, we have arguments sometimes.
Everything has their...
Right, but it led to a beautiful discussion. They could understand the difference between Sephardim, Ashkenazim, even sometimes two rabbis within the same Sephardic or Ashkenazic situation. But it was just a beautiful opportunity to talk about the whole idea of talking to a rabbi and getting that guidance. In Beis Yaakov of Queens, I've tried very hard as the Menayel to be as accessible as I can be to the girls.
I can attest to that. My daughters feel very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you. A lot of
the rabbi greets them when they come off the bus.
Yeah, I try. It's so important to build that connection. I want the girls to feel comfortable with. I am the rabbi of the school, and one of the few rabbis that they'll probably have real interaction with until at least high school. So it's very important that they feel comfortable and connected. And Baruch Hashem, the girls would come to my office, sometimes on their own, sometimes sent by their moros, their teachers, with a question about halacha, about law, or about parsha, about the weekly portion. And I loved it. And I tried as much as I can just to build that connection. And I could see, Baruch Hashem, that the girls felt a comfort level, which Amir Hashem will continue into high school and into the future. And again, as I mentioned before, this is true for boys too. We have to make sure they feel connected. It's just more natural and easier for them. But in the girls' situation, it's so important that they build those connections with Rabbi.
What an innovative idea, Rabbi. This is amazing, unbelievable. What grades did you start this Ask the Rabbi?
So in Chicago, I started as young as 5th grade.
Oh, wow.
Obviously, the type of question that I had the high school girls in Beis Yaakov ask was different than I would have a 5th grader ask.
Right.
But a question's a question. It's just to build that connection. But as young as 5th grade, and the feedback and was tremendous. It really was. Every time I did this assignment, the reaction was excellent. I never had any bad reaction result from this. It was all good.
This should be a college show movie. The entire world should know about this. It's so exciting. Wow, an amazing idea. Very innovative. Very, 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 very interesting. So, Rabbi, with what I understand, this was done with the children. What role do the parents play in this important initiative, I guess we'll call it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that when we at school, and it's, we always say this, but it's 100% true, the important partnership that the school has with the home. It's for sure, it's so integral, so important. So when we're teaching at school, this idea of asking the Rav, being connected with the Rav, so certainly the parents are, we hope, also connected with the Shul Rav, with Rabbanim, with different Jewish organizations. And the more that the children see, number one, that the parents also consult with a Rav. I mean, I often tell my own children, Mommy and I are going to call the Rav to ask a certain shaila. They don't need to know necessarily what the shaila is, the question. They don't need to know what the question is, but just But
they hear that the parents are in touch with the
We're
rabbi.
in touch, and they know that. They see that because they know. But it's something that I mention to them, and I want them to know that. So first of all, they should. I mean, it's true in and of itself that parents, just because it's important that parents have a connection with a rabbi for their own good, they should do it. But there's an additional critical benefit that the children are seeing that the parents are also involved with Rabbanim. Then what the children are learning at school is that much more real. I would also mention, it's obvious, but I think it's worth mentioning that God forbid, the children shouldn't see any type of a negative aspect to this. In other words, that the children should always be hearing from the parents positive interactions with the rabbi. That could even be just a speech, or a lot of times rabbis will come up with certain rules and regulations that are going on in the world, in the community. How the parents react to that, the children are watching. I think sometimes parents don't even realize, sometimes I didn't even realize how much my children are watching and listening to everything we do. And they pick up on all the subtleties.
Like a
so
sponge.
It's so important that just how parents are reacting to Rabbanim in general, just things that they're teaching, things that the Rabbanim are saying, how the parents are reacting to that will have an enormous effect on the children also. So all of this plays a role in what we're talking here about, this critical connection with Rabbanim. We at the school have to push that connection, create that connection, but at home it's reinforced and it's really role modeled, and it's critical.
100%. So the yeshiva, the Beis Yaakov, and the parents are partners in the children's upbringing.
Absolutely.
And it works hand in hand. It reminds me of a story. I don't remember where it was or the details, but basically there were two families from the same community. And the one family, the children all grew up, all beautiful, the Torah and the whole 9 yards. Well, the other family was not. And they complained. They're like, why is it that this family is this way and our children are that way? And they did some research and they dug into it, and they realized that when the father of this family, with all the kids are on the right path, he would come home after synagogue, after shul, and he would say, overall, the rabbi said such a beautiful insight, such a beautiful Dvar Torah, such a beautiful story, and he would give it over that way. On the other hand, the other family would come home, oh my gosh, the speech was so long.
Right.
And it was a negative.
For
and
sure.
that's what the kids saw, and that's what they heard. And unfortunately, when those came from the Holocaust, they had a difficult time in America with their jobs. And whenever they would have Shabbat, they would say, I don't know how to say it in Yiddish, but it's so hard to be a Yid.
Yeah, schwer sein to be a Yid.
Yeah. Feinstein, Moshe Feinstein says this over. And the kids would hear this, and they'd be like, if that's the case, if it's so hard, what do I need all this for? And God forbid, unfortunately, many of them dropped. But
right, 100%. When the children see
positivity, the rabbi was saying,
positivity, and how much the parents are happy to be connected to the Rav and want to listen, it makes such an incredible impact on the children. Incredible.
Very big difference. Ethics, our father says, make for yourself a rabbi and remove all doubt. And that's exactly what it is. Many times there's a difference of opinions, whether it's parents and they have a rabbi that's the intermediary, the one in the middle that deals it for them. So it's very important that every single person takes upon themselves a rabbi. And there's a big discussion, Rabbi Ginsparg, of the topic of technology.
Yeah, sure.
It's a topic that we constantly at Chazaq are getting, requests and phone calls and emails, and they mention what's the right approach. How does this tie into our discussion that we're having right now?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely ties in. It ties in very strongly. Obviously, there has been a lot and continues to be a lot of discussion about technology.
Because it evolves. There's constantly new gadgets.
That's right. It's constantly changing. And it's important to emphasize that there are tremendous benefits to technology. It's important that the audience know that Rabbanim don't just look at technology as a bad thing. There are tremendous positives to technology and tremendous ways to use technology. However, we all know that there are some very big challenges. So the Rabbanim, with their wisdom and siyata d'shmaya, are doing their best in this always evolving situation to give us guidance, and we have to trust in that guidance. And this is exactly what we were just talking about. If the children see that the parents, number one, follow the guidance. So for example, just to pick a simple example, it's been talked about, and it's talked about in the secular world too. It's not just by Rabbanim. Secular people will say the same thing. With dinner time, for example,
put away the phone.
Put away the phone.
Yeah.
The time when you're talking with your children, put away the phone so the children feel important and there's real dialogue and discussion with parents, which is what the children need and want. So if parents don't listen to that, not only is it harmful in and of itself because they're not connecting with their children, but what then do the children think when they see, everybody knows that the Rabbanim have said this, and I'm sure they even know that the secular world has said this. They're like, you're supposed to be doing this, and the parents aren't putting it away. So it just tears everything down. So it's critical that the parents understand that in and of itself, the importance of listening to the guidance we're receiving, so that their use of technology will be positive for themselves and their family. But it has this other aspect, an incredibly important ramification of this is what we're talking about, this critical connection with the Rabbanim, with the rabbis. It will be harmed if, God forbid, we're not following the guidance that the rabbis are giving us. Very important.
Very, very, very important. This is something that we've seen many, many times. Serious issues come out of this whole issue with technology. Where did the role of a rebbitzin? Is it, in your program of Ask the Rabbi, would it be okay for the fifth grader that was in Beit Yaakov to go over to a rebbitzin to ask a question, or was it specifically to the rabbi?
So I did it more with the rabbi because, Baruch Hashem, there are wonderful rebbitzins and moros who are in the schools and even after schools, after people are married, obviously, to consult with the ladies. That's beautiful. There is a time, though, where they do need to speak directly to the Rav, right? Whatever the situation might be. In fact, many times the Rebbitzins themselves might say this is something to ask the Rav directly. But of course, the Rebbitzins play a very important role. The Moros play an incredibly important role. They all play an important role. But ultimately, there's going to be situations where the rabbi does need to talk directly to the whether it's a boy or certainly in what we're discussing, the girl, the lady, and we want to make sure that connection is built. If the first time a person is told this is by the Rebbitzin, when they're already married and they've never interacted with a Rav, there's probably going to be some hesitation and intimidation, unfortunately, whatever. If we've laid that groundwork before, it's not something to worry about. And in addition to that, when we talk about what we were just discussing, when we talk about the guidelines that are given to the entire congregation, to the entire Jewish people, those are always coming from Rabbanim. So we want to get across that idea of listening to a Rav, etc.
100%. And it should be known that many times people feel, the local rabbi, like I'm saying, he's younger, or he's not in the know, or he's not, the greatest. It should be known that the rabbis many times consult with Gedolim, with big rabbis of the generation that give them the guidance of certain questions. And many times the rabbis, I on a personal level, my relationship with my rebbeim, many times they wouldn't give me the answer right away. Let me think it over. Let me discuss it over with this and this rabbi who knows this area much better. It's something that people should understand and know as well.
Absolutely. In fact, let me just add, I should have mentioned this before when I was talking about the Ask the Rabbi assignment. I always made a note of it, of pointing out to my students that when I have questions, I call my Rav, and I wanted them to understand that even though Rabbi Ginsparg, who's already like
a rabbi,
and now I'm even a little bit older than I was when I first started teaching 30 years ago, but even now, I want my Talmidos, like in the Beis Yaakov of Queens, to know, of course, I went to Reb Chaim Kanievsky Zatzal for a question, or of course I call my Rabbanim in Chicago or now in Queens or in the 5 towns. I'm making those phone calls. I want the girls to know that. They need to know that the connection to a rabbi is always, no matter how old you are, and that Rabbeim consult Rabbeim. It's such an incredibly important lesson.
People should know that. People think, he's just, saying it.
No, absolutely.
Many times.
And Rabbi Meir, you should know, that impression was made on me because one of my Rabbeim would always tell me how he consulted with his Rosh Yeshiva. So it goes chain by chain.
That's right.
But that's how Klal Yisrael works. It's essential. We have an essential connection with our previous generations. That's what we believe in. We look to our older and more experienced Rabbanim to guide us. And that's that lesson that we're trying to get across to a generation where we know, unfortunately, that's not always the case.
That's right.
It's very much taught almost like not so much to listen to the older generation. In fact, it's interesting. technology having nothing to do with like the technology itself, but the concept, very often the kids know better than the adults. So I'm saying, like, without talking about the good and bad of a cell phone, whatever, but the idea is the kids see that we know better than the adults, and in some way perhaps that leads to somewhat of a little bit lack of respect. Like, they don't know how to do any of this stuff, but we in the Klal Yisrael, in the Jewish people, we know we're dealing with something far more holy and important, and for us, the Mesorah, the tradition, handed down from rabbi to student, is so critical that the next generation of students, the ones that I'm involved with right now, need to know that they need to be connected with me and their moros, who are connected to their moros and their rabbeim, etc. And that gets that lesson across.
Powerful, Rabbi Ginsparg. Such inspiration, such chizuk. So important for everyone listening to take this to heart, to make sure to implement this concept with the children, with the family.
Yeah.
Rabbi, we have another custom by Torah Talks to end off with one final message for our broad audience. What would that be, Rabbi Ginsparg?
I would say that what we talked about, obviously, this evening is so important, and we called it critical connections.
Yes.
I would say that the most critical connection is the connection with Hashem Yisparach, with Hashem. And when I talk about a connection with Hashem, I'm talking specifically at this moment about tefillah, about davening. We can talk together and discuss, but in the end, you have to have Siyata D'Shmaya, heavenly assistance. And we have to daven to Hashem to help us with growing in our own lives and positively affecting our children. We all know that none of this is easy. There's challenges and difficulties, and it's hard, but it's hard because there's an incredible gold medal, so to speak, which is being how lucky we are to be from Jews connected to Hashem. So we know that all of our efforts and the challenges is for something incredible and really brings simcha, happiness to our lives. Real happiness, I tell this to my students all the time, real happiness and simcha is by being a frum Jew and listening to Hashem and accomplishing in life and being connected with Hashem. But in terms of specifically our discussion tonight, we need to daven to Hashem to raise our children properly. It's just so important. So that's maybe the most critical connection. In order to make this critical connection with the rabbi also possible, is that we ask Hashem, help us to make the right decisions, to be connected with Hashem, to be connected with Rabbanim, and that we should be good role models and make the right decisions so we can give that teaching over to our children, so that the next generation will continue in this holy Klal Yisrael that we are.
Amazing, Rabbi Ginsparg. Shlita, what inspiration, what chizuk, what an amazing Torah talk we just had.
Thank you for having me.
The pleasure all ours. Yagda Torah, Yagda, the Rabbi is doing an amazing job teaching Torah and giving it over to the next generation. And we should all take it to heart, like was mentioned, to make yourself a rabbi, to go ask the questions, even the advice, to go over to the Rabbanim. They're there for us. They're always ready. And Mitzvah Hashem, we should be zocheh, we should merit to see the Geulah Shlema, the complete redemption.
Amen.
It should come by Merav Vein is spilling our days. Amen. Just a few thank yous, of course. Everyone at Chazaq, Rabbi, and Rahman, and Natan A, Natan B, and Izzy, and the whole team over here for all the back work that they've been doing and do on a consistent basis. Thank you very much to dailygiving.org. $1 a day goes a very, very far way. We encourage everyone to check it out. Torah Anytime for hosting this podcast, along with all the podcast platforms where you can listen to these Torah Talks. And reminder, every single Tuesday night, Torah Talks with special guests, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, chazaq.org/live and torahanytime.com/chazaq2. Thank you very much, Rabbi Ginsparg, once again.
Pleasure.
Saras Tavis.
Thank you.